Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Rentman Best Practices webinar. I just want to thank you all for taking your time and learning more about Rentman today. I know that most of us have found ourselves with more time than we would probably have liked, so we appreciate you choosing to spend your time learning more about Rentman. To get started in the webinar today, we're first going to talk about how this webinar is going to work, and then we'll get into the software so I can start showing you some best practices. And just so that everybody is aware, this is the last training webinar in this series. So previous to this, my colleagues have given you an introduction. They've gone through warehousing and equipment, and they've also done document templates, crew planning, and invoicing. And of course, today that leaves our best practices, where we may cover a few topics that we've covered before, but we're hoping to give you some more tips and tricks in this webinar. So today's agenda and our best practices is first we're going to go through some general best practices around communication in the software. Then I'll go through equipment and projects and discuss some tips and tricks there. Then we'll briefly speak about crew planning and also go through statistics. Of course, just like all the webinars, this session is also recorded, so we will make a recording available on the blog post, which you should find a link for in the chat. Additionally, you will also receive an email about 24 hours after this webinar with a link to the blog post so you can see that recording as well. It usually takes us a little bit to render that video and get it uploaded, so give us just a bit of time after the webinar before we make that recording available. Of course, as I mentioned, this is the last webinar in this training series. Of course, we are collecting feedback from everyone on how this training webinar series went. And so stay tuned for future training opportunities if we can take on board that feedback and improve them more. Okay, and then this webinar is, of course, in listen and view only mode. So you can't use your microphone or turn on your camera, but you can use the Q&A just below to ask any questions that you'd like. I am supported by my colleagues Bogdan, Lauren, and Parker today, so they'll be taking care of the Q&A. And some questions we may choose to answer live, other questions we may answer by text. So we'll answer those as we go throughout the webinar. And then lastly, after this webinar finishes, we do have a 1-minute survey we'd like you to fill out. As I mentioned, we do want to do more training opportunities in the future, so your feedback is vital to making sure we can tailor this to the best content that you require. Okay, and without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started here. Okay, so as I mentioned, the first thing that we're going to do is actually go through some general best practices. And the first thing that I want to focus on is communication. So the first thing that I'm going to show you here is actually notifications and how to set those up. You can find them here by clicking the bell icon at the top of your account and clicking on Preferences. Now, here you'll find a list of all notifications that can be set up, and you can receive these notifications via email, mobile app, and web. So not only can you set these up, but everyone on the team should go into their account and set up their own notifications. For example, maybe some people would want the financial notifications of when a quote is signed or when an invoice has been paid, but maybe other people just need to manage their tasks and maintenance. So each person will tailor these notifications, but that means that everybody on the team will stay informed. So a great communication tool here with these tasks, or with these notifications, sorry. Okay, now the next thing that I want to show you is also on the communication side, and that would be the messages. So you can access them by clicking your name here at the top and then clicking messages. Here in the messages section, this is where you can view all of your outgoing messages. So when you're emailing your quotes and invoices to customers, but also when you're sending the crew member invitations. Here you'll see if they were sent successfully. So for example, if you accidentally typed in an email address wrong, you would see that it was not been able to send, and you can quickly catch that and resend that to the right person. So you can manage those all here. Okay, the next thing that I want to show you, still on the communication side, but we're going to go down here in configuration to the bottom. And here in configuration, you'll find the customer communication section. And we're going to go into the communication settings here. In the communication settings, this is where you can set up a signature and BCC email address. Now, as a best practice, we do recommend setting up a BCC email address, maybe yourself or a generic one for the company, because that way you can track everything that's being sent out in that inbox as well. Just makes things a little bit easier. And then on the email signature side, you can set up this signature to be used when the emails are being sent out, and the signature will be applied at the bottom of the email. Now here below, you'll find some variables as well. For example, I can go ahead and add a variable for the logged in user, the first and last name, and then I can go ahead and add a job title or whatever else. What this means is that whoever is sending out that quote or invoice or document, it will use their name, so whoever's logged in and sending that out. So variables, you can find them in a few different areas of the software. You can find them here, you can find them in document templates, also in email templates as well. So you'll find those in a few different areas. You can play around with them, but that's the main idea. It can take information from other parts of the software. Okay, so that's it on some of the general communication best practices. The next two things I want to talk to you about are actually our extra input fields and our shortcuts. So here in configuration as well, this is where you'll find the extra input fields here in the settings. Extra input fields are a really great tool for you if you find that Rentman is missing some fields that you need to track. When you add a new extra input field here, you can find all of the different areas that you can add extra input fields to. For example, you could add an extra input field to your equipment items, and you could include a name of your equipment in another language. For example, if you're a company that works on the border between two companies, you may be doing business in two countries. So with an extra input field on your equipment, you can add that name as a different language, and then you can use this extra input field in your documents. So that allows you to easily send out a quote in maybe English and another language or whatever you need to do. Okay. As I mentioned, I'm going to go here to the equipment module, and I wanted to show you our shortcuts. So you can access shortcuts by pressing the question mark on your keyboard in any screen of Rentman. So this will pull up the shortcuts. And if you're like me, maybe you get tired of clicking a million times in a day. So you can use the shortcuts on your keyboard to complete action items in Rentman as well, whether that's moving an item, duplicating it, deleting items are great examples of these shortcuts. And like I said, you can find them in every area of Rentman, so you can use your keyboard a little bit more as well. Okay, so that's it on our general best practices. So the next thing I want to go through is actually our equipment best practices. We're going to split this up into two parts. The first part is I want to talk about some best practices with setting up your equipment, and then we'll talk about best practices for updating equipment items if changes are made. Okay, so when you're setting up your equipment items, there's a few things that you should keep in mind. I'm going to double click on an equipment item here, our DJM 900, and just see some more information inside. When I scroll down to the bottom of my equipment page here, I can see some pricing information. Of course, most of you have been using Rentman before. Some of you might be new. In either case, you've probably already set up a rental price, what you'll charge your customer. That's how you're going to make your money and what will be included on quotes and invoices. But some of you may not have set up a sub-rental cost, and I do want to bring your attention to this. Sub-rental costs are a very useful tool because Rentman can calculate these costs back into projects to provide an accurate view of your costings. So for example, if you've planned 3 items on a project that are not available, you don't have any inventory and you would need to subrent these, usually they turn red in the project. If they turn red in the project, Rentman will use this subrental cost and calculate that back into the financials of your project. So not only is it calculating the actual cost, but also if you're subrenting that from a supplier. So I do recommend adding this price if you can. Later on, I'll show you in the project where these costs will get calculated in. Okay, and just above this, I want to bring your attention to the factor groups as well. Factor groups are a really great tool to use because it allows you to give discounts based on the time period of the equipment rental. For example, you may want to give a slightly lower daily rental price for a 7-day rental versus a 3-day rental. And factors are what allow you to do that. Basically, you'll set the amount of days and the factor that you want to apply. So maybe for a 3-day rental, you only want to charge 2.5 days, in which case your factor would be 2.5. These factor groups are set up in the configuration module, and you can add them to each equipment item. In the project, they are also editable, which I'll show you a little bit later on. Okay, the next thing that I want to talk about here in the equipment item is QR codes. Some of you may be using them, some of you may not be, but I do want to discuss the benefits of using QR codes. We'll find our QR codes here in the serial numbers tab. These are specific serial numbers for individual items. So total, I have 2 DJ mixers, and these serial numbers denote a specific item. Each of these serial numbers has its own QR code here. When I scan this QR code, this individual item will be tracked. I do want to bring your attention also to the QR tab here because sometimes it can be slightly confusing. So you have QR codes on each serial number, and then you also have a QR code tab here that is a generic QR code. If you were to scan this QR code, a random item would be assigned out of your stock. It wouldn't be assigning a specific item. So again, you can scan just the generic codes, especially if cables or things that you don't really mind tracking. But for the items that you do want to track, you would add serial numbers and scan these QR codes. I'll show you in just a moment what this looks like visually so you can see the difference. But before we move on to that, I do want to show you also how to view the history of a serial number. So when I actually select my serial number here, if I go into edit this item, you'll see the history tab here. And when I open the history tab, this is where you'll see when this item has been scanned in and out. So I've selected a period of 2 days, so I can see that yesterday we scanned it out, last night actually, we scanned it out to on location, and then it was returned this morning to the warehouse. So this is how this data will be built on this equipment item, and then you can make important selling decisions later on based on which equipment items have had the hardest life. Okay, but as I mentioned, I wanted to show you visually the difference between a generic and a serial number QR code. So what I'm going to do is select my DJ mixer here, and then I'm going to go ahead to more actions and create my equipment tag. Now I've selected one item. Feel free to select multiple items, especially if you're getting set up with your QR codes. You can generate multiple QR codes in one go. Now, here I have my top QR code and my serial number QR codes. As you saw in my serial numbers, I only had 2 serial numbers. So every time you create equipment tags, Rentman will generate the generic QR code and also the serial number QR codes as well. You can tell visually the difference because these will have the serial numbers and this will not. And also the serial number codes will also have an internal reference here. So you can tell the difference visually between these. Now, if you want to go ahead and add these on your equipment items physically, then you can download this as a PDF and print it from any label printer that will print from a PDF. And of course, these are fully editable in the configuration module, as are all of your documents. Okay, the last thing that I want to bring your attention to, a little tip here, is when we select our DJ mixer, we can see some information here to the side in the widget. And if I scroll down to the bottom, I can also see tasks, notes, and files on the equipment level as well. Now you'll see here that I have added an image for this equipment item. You can add any types of files, whether that be images, Excel, documents, anything you want, PDFs. But with images, these can become very useful. Once you add an image by dragging and dropping or by clicking here to add from your computer, you can click this arrow here and you can choose to display it in documents. What this means is that if you have some new crew in the warehouse, maybe you want to include these images on the packing list of equipment so that they can easily see what they should be picking out. But also maybe some of you are running, party rental or maybe events where you want to show visually on a quote what you're actually quoting for. So you can add these images on the quotes as well. So again, you can add as many images, but you would just need to go in and select which ones you want to actually add on documents. Okay, so that's how to kind of set up your equipment and some best practices that we recommend. I also do want to talk about how to actually update equipment items. I'm sure most of you find that things change on occasion, so you do need to make some updates there. The first thing that I want to show you is actually bulk editing your equipment items. So for example, with downtime, maybe you want to do a bit of a cleanup or organization in the warehouse. Maybe you've moved some items around. What I'm going to do is actually select our dimmers here because we did move their location. They're originally in B3. So what I'm going to do is select all my dimmers here, go to the top to more actions, and I'm going to edit these items. So these are the areas that you can bulk edit for these equipment items. Of course, you can choose the type. You can also enter quantities if they should be displayed and added in the planner. But for this, we're actually going to change the location in warehouse, and we're actually going to move those to A4. Now we can see that location in warehouse has already been updated, so I didn't have to go one by one and edit these. I was able to do it all at one go. Okay, and the last thing that I want to show you about updating is actually here with the import functionality. So as most of you know, to get started, it's nice and easy to import your information into Rentman. You'll just drag and drop your Excel spreadsheet here to import that. But what you might not know is that you can also use the import functionality to update your items. For example, maybe sometime in the future you buy some new stock and you need to add serial numbers on a specific item. So you can use that update import and update based on the equipment information that's already in Rentman, and you'll choose the information you want to update based on. All right. So that's kind of some best practices with setting up your equipment and kind of updating that. So now I'm going to take a small break here, see if there's any questions that we would like to go through. So panelists, are there any questions that we should go through now?
Thanks for asking, Allison. Hi, everyone. My name is Bogdan, of course. Yes, we do have a couple of questions coming in, and the first one being from Vicky. And she asks if Rentman is able to set a different sub-rental price for different suppliers.
Yes, okay. Let me have a quick look here. I'm just gonna check here in the suppliers of the equipment item. So yes, when you actually set up your equipment items, you can add the suppliers here and you can also set a price. Furthermore, when you set up your suppliers and contacts, you can also add special discounts on the supplier level as well. So when you actually create a sub-rental request, Rentman will use some of that information to calculate those costs back into the sub-rental.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Now, once again, another question from Vicky. The prices on the equipment, are they net costs or gross costs?
Ooh, that is a good question. Let me have a think about this. I believe it would be, Bogdan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's gross.
It should be, as far as
Yeah.
I know as well. I'm just waiting for Lauren's response just to see if she's got anything
Yeah,
to add to it.
everything's excluding tax, and
Right,
tax
yep.
gets calculated at the end of a project.
Excellent.
Thanks
Thank
for
you
that,
very much.
Lauren.
Yep. We do have a couple of more questions. We'll handle them quickly now. Another question from Vicky. Is the list price stated here also the purchase price of the item? And if not, where can we see the purchase price of the item?
So this could be the purchase price or also the recommended retail value. So it is up to you on which price you want to use there as a list price. But also when you are serializing your equipment items, let me actually go into one that we already have set up here. So when you are adding your serial numbers and you add a new one, this is where you can also enter the date of purchase and purchase price here. So this would actually be purchase price, whereas the list price, it could be what you purchase it at or what the recommended retail value is. I guess if you purchase it with a really good deal, maybe you want to use the recommended retail value. So that's up to you.
Excellent answer, Allison. Thank you very much. Only two more questions to go. The first one being, how much can a QR code be damaged before you're unable to scan it?
Perfect question. You've asked the right person for that. So let me just briefly start by saying here at Rentman, we are Team QR Code. We do recommend QR codes specifically for that reason. So QR codes can be damaged up to 25% and still be scanned. I know from personal experience when I've been scanning them, literally I don't even get my phone over the whole QR code before it already starts scanning. So QR codes are very easy to scan, whereas barcodes can be a little bit more difficult, especially if they do get damaged. So yeah, there's some great differences there. That's why we recommend QR codes, because they can still be damaged and scanned.
All right, thanks a bunch. Might be also good to know that the type of QR codes that we are recommending usually have the industrial coating, and what the suppliers say about those types of materials is that they can be up to 30% completely damaged and still be used. So just something to keep in mind. But the last question coming in from Roberto is a pretty straightforward one. Can we update the extra input fields with an import template?
Yes, yes. So the extra input fields become part of your database. So you can import that information. Like I said, with the equipment example here, I didn't add that extra input field. I should have. Apologies on that. But the extra input field would come down here at the bottom of the equipment item. And then you can import all of the names, especially if you're using a different name in a different language for your equipment. So you can not only import the English name, but also the other language name that you would like in your import document. So yes, fully importable.
Thank you very much, Allison. He did actually ask about the language specifically, so kudos on that. We're all out of questions for now, and I'll talk to you in a little bit.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. Some great questions. Okay. Next, we're going to move on to our projects, and you may see some similar information that we've already shown before, but I want to focus on some tips and tricks here in the project. So what I'm going to do first is I want to show you a little trick that we have in the software that you may not know about. So what I've done is I've selected a project here, and I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. What you'll see down here at the bottom is that a note has been added from an email address, which was my email address. And also I have a document already added here. I don't have any other financial documents, just this one document. Now, what I did before the webinar was I actually emailed myself this document straight into my account, and Rentman went ahead and attached this document for me. You can see here actually an email was received, I got this notification, and also a new project note was added. Now, the way that I did this was I sent an email to my Rentman email address. Your Rentman email address will be your account name. So whatever you find here at the top, mine specifically is the Allison Webinar 6, and then it will be at rentmanclient.com. So what you'll do is you'll put an email to that address, the account name at rentmanclient.com. In the subject line, you'll put the number of the project that you want to add something to, whether that be a note or a document. So I sent that email to myself. I put hashtag 126 in the subject line, and then I just attached this document to the email. As soon as I sent that out, Rentman went ahead and attached it correctly here to the right project for me. So while I'm on the go, having agreements with customers, I can quickly send things that I've talked about right into my Rentman account without ever having to access my Rentman account. So it's a handy trick there if you want to test things out yourself. Okay. So next, I want to go through project templates and some of its uses, and then we'll go through the project itself and talk about some best practices there. So we'll find our project templates here by adding a new project. If you haven't used project templates before, I really do recommend them. They couldn't be more useful to be able to send out quotes quickly. Of course, you want to prepare now for when things get busy again, so setting up these project templates, it's a perfect time to do so. And of course, when things are busy again, you can send out these quotes even quicker. So we have here our 2-day production template, but some good examples of templates are, especially if you set up something like weddings, usually you have a similar setup every time. So that project would be the perfect example of a project template. But again, any type of event that you do often enough, go ahead and create a template because it'll make your life a lot easier. With our 2-day production template, we can actually preview the information inside. So we can see the time schedule here. I already had production days and setup and breakdown times. I also already have my equipment separated into groups here. And then I also already have my crew jobs all separated here. And so everything I need is already here. It makes it really easy for me. And now what I can do is choose a new date. So let's go for next Friday the 3rd. And we'll see that new date get applied here on the time schedule. Now I'm going to go ahead and create our new project. So we're calling it the house party here. Of course, it's now in a concept status. So all new projects will start off this way. And of course, once a quote is sent out, it's optional. And once that's been confirmed by the customer and digitally signed, it will change to confirmed. Now, I do want to mention that Rentman automates this process for you, but feel free to manually change this at any point as well. Now I'm just going to add quickly a customer here so we can have a customer in our project. And I'm also going to add a location quickly. Now, in case you weren't aware, Rentman can calculate the distance from your warehouse to the location in the project, and it can apply a rate that you will set in your crew and transport tab in the project. I will show you where this gets calculated later on, but it's just good to know if you want to use this functionality so that Rentman just can calculate that for you and save you some time. Okay, the next thing that I want to show you is the time schedule. I know we talk about this a lot, but it is really important to understand, so I will repeat this as well. I do want to point out that the planning period and usage period, these will always be here in the project. So every new project will always have these. The planning period is what Rentman uses to calculate equipment availability. So from this date until this time, your equipment becomes unavailable to be used anywhere else. The usage period is what Rentman uses to calculate the cost back to your customer. I also mentioned before with factors, Rentman will use the usage period to apply the factors. So if you've set a usage period of 2 days, Rentman will apply the factor you have set for a 2-day rental. Now, there are other times here in the time schedule. I do recommend being as detailed as possible in the time schedule. The reason for that is because if times do change, inevitably in this industry, we know things change. What you can do is change it here once. So we'll change our setup time to 2 hours later. And this time will be changed everywhere else that it is used. Again, this saves you time from having to change it in individual places. Now, what you may not have known is that you also have these arrows here to the side. You have the option to choose where you want to display these times, and you also have the option to go ahead and set a default usage and planning period. If you're like me, I'm not always a fan of the name planning period or usage period, so sometimes I just add my own period names, and in that case, you can just go ahead and set them as the default usage and planning period. Rentman just needs to know what the time frame is so it can calculate that for you. Okay, before we move on to the rest of the project, I do want to take a moment here and discuss sub-projects. Now, some of you may be working with conferences, some of you may be working with festivals, or a variety, or maybe a mixture of both, in which case sub-projects could become very useful for you. Also, if you're doing tours, these are some great examples. What sub-projects allow you to do is add different equipment to different locations at the same time, or to different times, or different equipment lists. So I want to visually show you here so you can get a better idea. I'm going to add sub-project A and B. Now, our main project will always be what the customer is added to. So all sub-projects will be for one customer, and that's added here in the main project. But for each individual project, you can add a different location and you can add a different time schedule. You can also add different equipment and different crew jobs needed. So again, this allows you to kind of separate everything you need, but also keep it all together so that you can send quotes and invoices to your customer all together for the same project. You could also send them separately per sub-project as well. It's completely up to you. You also have some options here on the sub-project level to make things a little bit easier for you. You could duplicate a sub-project, you can split or merge your sub-projects together as well, and you can remove sub-projects from the financial overview or the planner. If you remove a sub-project from the financial overview, that will not be calculated into the total costs. If you remove it from the planner, the equipment added in that sub-project will not be deducted from your availability. So again, just some nice options here on the sub-project level, but sub-projects will make your life a lot easier if you're not already using them. All right, we're going to go ahead and go back into the main project here, and we'll move on to the equipment tab. All right. All right, so here in the equipment tab, you've noticed we have quite a long list of equipment items here. This has all come from our project template, but of course, you'll also notice that we have some items here in red. The first best practice that I want to bring your attention here to is alternative equipment items. What I'm going to do is select an item that's marked in red, our DigiCo mixing console here, and I'm going to look to the widget in the side and scroll down to the bottom. Here you'll see the alternative equipment items section. Now, when you set up your equipment items, this is when you'll set up your alternatives, just like you set up your accessories. When you set up these alternatives, it makes it easier on the planner's job when they're actually planning here in the software in a project. Because if they see something that's marked in red, they can quickly check here and say, hey, oh, I do have an alternative. Let me go ahead and click the name here to add that. And then I'm just going to quickly use a shortcut here and delete that. And now I went ahead and saved myself about 200 euros because now I don't have to subrent this item. I've saved myself that money because I chose an alternative for my own stock. So that feature, if you're not using it, I really do recommend it. You can take this time to set up some alternatives so that when things do get busy, you can quickly switch them out and save yourself some money here in the project. All right, now I also want to bring to your attention, before I spoke about subrental costs. I do want to point out here, anything marked in red is viewed as a shortage, in which case Rentman will use the subrental cost, and that is what will get calculated back into the financial tab. Okay, so next I want to show you actually temporary items here in the project as well. You may not have used them before, but you'll find them here when you click next to the add button. You can find your temporary items. Now, temporary items are really only useful if you will never carry this item in inventory. There will be no statistics on this temporary item and no data. It really is just temporary. So for example, I'm going to add a custom banner as a temporary item here. I'm just going to print it once. It's never going to be used again. So I'm going to go ahead and add this into the project so it can be included on the quote. So we'll say our custom banner cost us 100 and we actually paid 70 for it. And we're going to go ahead and add that there. Now, oh, I actually added my temporary item to the wrong section. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my temporary item and I'm just going to scroll down with it and add it here under my consumables. So now we have our custom banner there. And actually, I also see another mistake that I made there. So let me go ahead and edit this quickly because it should have been a sale item. We're not going to rent out the banner because it is custom. There we go. You'll see the change from the double arrow to the single arrow for the sale item there. Now, I also want to point out that this item is marked in red. All temporary items will always be marked in red because the idea is that usually it is temporary. It is something you usually have to order, so don't worry if that is also marked in red. Okay. Now, the next thing that I want to show you is also how to bulk edit your items here in the project. So let's take the scenario of our factors. So you can see our factors here. All of our factors are set to a 1.5. But let's say that for this specific project, I do want to change the factors and the pricing just a little bit. What I'm going to do is select all of my equipment items here and go to the top and edit them. We can select our factor and we can choose the factor that we want to do. So let's take the example of maybe this was a 3-day rental and we wanted to charge 2 days instead of 3 days. So in that case, we could add a factor of 2. You could also charge maybe 2.25, so you can add those decimals in there. You can be as specific as you would like with your factors. Once you save that, you can see that all the factors have now been edited. It's important to note that these have just been edited on the rental side, not on the sale item side. So that's how you can kind of edit here in the project as well. Of course, Rentman will take the default information from the equipment, but you can edit that all here. For example, maybe you want to offer more discounts, in which case you could add a discount percentage here as well for the equipment item. Maybe you want to add more of a margin on top of your equipment item, in which case you could say, okay, I want to add negative 20%. Let's actually move this a little bit. I'll close that. Just so we can see how these prices get affected. So as you see here, I added the negative 20%, and that will add a margin on top. We could also do that with, let's see here. We could also do that here with the other one. Maybe we'll add 10%, and we can see that price jump. Now, if you're not a fan of percentages, that's okay too. You also have some options to actually edit the unit price. For example, Maybe we want to take our, we'll take our Digico console here. Maybe you want to actually offer a 50% discount on this. You can actually use Rentman just as you would use Excel. You can say equals 400 divided by 2, and it will go ahead and calculate that 50% discount for you. So you have the option not only to use the discount percentages, but you can do these calculations on the unit price as well, and that will be reflected in the total price. So just some tips and tricks there for you. The last thing that I want to show you here is on the equipment group level. So let's actually take some of our tools down here. I'm going to double click on the equipment group here, and this box will pop up. You have the option here to show and price calculation. So if you did want to add any free items, you could also add an equipment group and just remove the entire equipment group from the price calculation. Maybe you just want to plan your own tools that you don't want to charge for, whatever you may need be, but this is a nice way to also offer those free items as well. Once I remove it from the price calculation, you'll notice here in the total price, it will now be striked out. Okay, so that's all I wanted to show you on the equipment side. So next we're going to move into the crew and transport tab. So this is where you would actually set the jobs that you need for this project. I've already organized all of my jobs based on the time schedule. As I mentioned to you, we did change our setup time as well, and that's already reflected here in the time schedule. So I do want to show you how that all gets connected. What you'll do here at the top is add a new equipment group, function group. So you can say, maybe we just need extras, who knows? And you want to plan some extra people at a different time. So you'll select the usage period box there because by default it will add to your usage and planning period. But this is where you can see your entire time schedule and you can choose different times. Maybe we just want to plan some extra people for the breakdown time just because it's a little more work than the setup. So we can go ahead and add this here down at the bottom right there with the extras. So that's how everything will get connected. I do recommend connecting it, but you also have the option here to add a time manually, in which case if you are changing times, you would have to manually come back and change this time later on. I also want to take a moment here to show you the transport calculations that I mentioned before. So if I actually open up one of our transport functions, you'll see here that you can take over the distance from location. So when this is checked, Rentman will calculate the distance from your warehouse to the location entered in the project, and the distance will get calculated here. I do not have a warehouse location in my account, but if it was there, it would be calculated. Of course, you can choose to always enter this manually if you'd like. This is useful if you've set a kilometer price. So if you have that kilometer price, or if you're in the US, maybe that's $1 per mile price, you can add either of those and it will be calculated based on the distance here. You can also choose for that to be back and forth. Okay. So that's it for the crew and transport tab. Next, we're going to move into additional costs. I'm really just going to briefly speak about this module because some people may not be sure actually how to use it. So additional costs could be useful if you do need to charge for maybe hotel costs or dinners or lunches, anything like that. So if you do have any of those additional costs that you would like for your customer to be liable for, go ahead and add them here in the additional cost section. Give it a name, add the pricing information, any other details here that you need to track, and then these can be included on your invoice as well. All right, so now we're going to go into the financial tab. This is where you will, of course, find an overview of all of your costs. I am going to take a moment just to briefly go through the estimated, planned, and actual costs because it ties back to some of the best practices I've been mentioning. On the rental costs, you can see here that the costs of the expected sub-rental are based on the sub-rental costs in equipment. This is where those costs will get calculated back to. So not only are you just calculating all of your regular costs, but also how much your sub-rentals are going to cost you for this project. So this number is as accurate as it could be. So I really do recommend using sub-rental costs. Again, it's going to give you the most accurate picture as possible. I also do want to talk about how crew costs get calculated because there are some accurate costings happening here as well. So what we just did in crew and transport was we estimated what a job would cost us. So for example, sound technician, we estimated that role. Later on, under plan costs, in the planning tab of the crew planner, we're actually going to plan individual people. So we're going to plan Joe as a sound technician. And Joe could be a freelancer or contractor that has a slightly different rate than what we estimated. So we will see that difference between estimated and plan costs there. Once Joe finishes working the event, let's say it was a terrible weather day, things took so much longer than they needed to, so Joe ended up working 2 hours later than what I planned for him to. Joe's going to register his time in the time registration module, and then those costs will be calculated back as actual costs. So that way you can see how well did you estimate it and on the quote versus how much did it actually cost you. And this is a great tool for your sales reps because they can become even better at the estimations and make sure that those costs are as accurate as possible from the beginning. I also want to show you down below our conditions. So of course, your terms and conditions on your documents, the default ones will already be added in configuration. You can add a document there that will always be included. But you could also choose to add additional conditions, and you can set up also other conditions that are already selectable here. It could be that for weddings, you have a set of additional conditions, or for conferences. So you know that on top of your default terms and conditions, you can also add some of these additional ones. The last thing that I want to show you here is the handy dandy lock price functionality. Maybe you are the sales rep and you fully quoted, everything has been agreed on. What you may want to do is lock the price. Now, what this means is if any changes are made here in the project or in the warehouse, this total price would not change, but your costs would be reflected. So if you want to make sure that you're charging only the amount you agreed on with your customer, you can lock the price, but still track all the costs for if additional items get added or anything like that. Okay, I am going to take another break and see if we have any questions. Panelists, do we have any questions coming in?
Sure, we do, Allison. You're doing great so far. Now, the first question comes in from Aspen. It's a pretty straightforward one. Allison, what is a surface item?
Yes. Surface item would actually be something like carpet. So if you're setting up a conference booth, like an exhibition booth, you may need to actually charge for the area that you'll be laying the carpet on. This could also apply to drapes. So it's anything that you're going to charge based on the surface area.
Brilliant answer. Now, the next question comes in from an anonymous person, and they're asking, how do they create a project template?
Right. That's a great question. So there are two ways to do that, but the first way is actually to create the project from scratch first. You have to have an existing project. So the first way to do that is actually in the project itself. You can apply a project template from there and save this project. The other way is in the configuration module under project templates. Here you can add a new project template. So give it a name. Maybe we'll say that this is a wedding template. Then you can search for a name of a project and you can select it from here and save. Again, you can work in either way. Maybe if you're setting up a bunch of projects, you can set them all up to from scratch in projects and then come here and just create a bunch of project templates. So that could be a good way to do that.
Indeed, it would. Now, we've got two questions coming from Elke and Remco, which will basically track back to the same answer. When they're creating subrents and they have to pick up the equipment themselves, is there any way to show the transportation in the crew planner?
Yes. So if you are going to create a sub rental, what you would need to do is create it as a project here. Just say pick up sub rental so and so. You can add the equipment there that is going to be sub rented. You can also sub rent directly from that project, and then that project can also have transport so that you're reserving a person and a transport for that date and time. So I hope that makes sense. I think I got a little confusing explanation, but it would have to be in a regular project, but that sub rental can be connected to the regular project.
It was pretty clear to me. Of course, if anything else is unclear, please ask another question for the next batch of questions. Now, just one last one before we go any further. And Kieran is actually wondering if any companies are getting their freelancers to register their working hours in Rentman. Now, I'm not really too sure about that one, but I know that Allison is a really experienced product expert, so maybe she knows some examples of that.
Just to confirm, Bogdan, the question was if freelancers are registering their hours?
Yes, well, the exact question was, are any companies getting their freelancers to register their working hours? But maybe we can touch that and let the viewers know what possibilities there are.
Yeah, I definitely recommend if for any other customers that have an answer to that, please pop it in the Q&A for Kieran. Could be good just to hear from other customers on that. I do know that Rentman is only as strong as its use. So if crew members are not entering availability or their time, of course, yeah, it can be a struggle. But you as the planner know that you can come in and add time registration for those crew members. So if you have a hard time getting them to actually log in and do it, you can do it for them. I know it's not ideal, it doesn't really save you time. But yeah, I guess it just depends on if you're actually able to make them do so. It's made even easier from the Rentman mobile app, so there's really no excuse. I'm not saying that they don't have excuses, but it's even easier for them. They can do it right on their phone. They can even clock in and clock out actually at the event itself. So there's a lot of flexibility there. Hopefully they realize the benefit of this and will do it for you.
Brilliant, Allison. Thank you so much. We're good to go.
All right, perfect. Okay, so let's just go right back into our project here. And I'm going to actually go into the crew planner so that we can go through some tips and tricks there. So once I open up the crew planner, it will go ahead and apply a filter so that I only plan for this one project. Of course, you could always remove the filter from the side and you could plan for multiple projects at a time. So you could look at all of your confirmed projects over a 1 week period and just knock out your planning in one go. So depends also on how well you can multitask. I do prefer sometimes to go project by project, but also there's needs sometimes where you just need to plan for multiple projects. All right, I'm going to close my filters there to the side, and I'm just going to zoom in just a little bit more here so that I can see the jobs that I quoted for. When you click on a job here in the crew planner, this is when the crew members turn different colors on the sides. Kind of looks like Christmas. So we got some green crew members. That means that they are available and we can plan them immediately. Anybody marked in red means that they are not available and they're either working another event or they've marked themselves as unavailable for a reason. And anybody marked in white means that we are just not sure if they're available or not, in which case we can send them an invitation inside of Rentman. Now you can select all of your crew members and you can view them here below in the timeline. So you can see exactly who's working what. So I can see, wow, apparently I'm working a lot. I don't see anybody else working so much, but you would see their jobs here and listed. I can tell Chris is on holiday and I can also see their backgrounds of the red and green, which indicates their availability. Now, you also, as the power user, have some hours, some options here where you can drag and drop on the timeline, and you can enter availability or reservations or appointments for multiple crew members at a time. So you can say, okay, I'm going to select all of these crew members and I'm going to go ahead and reserve them. I think I have an event coming, but I'm not sure. So I'm going to reserve them for this time. Later on, I can actually plan them on the event when I know for sure it's going to go forward. So you also have a lot of options here as the power user to manage your crew members' times. I also want to bring to your attention the folder structure here. So each folder, of course, you can open and close these. I've got my freelancers and my full-time employees. However, you may also want to use your folder structure in a slightly different way. It could be that you have a first choice of crew members and a second choice of crew members. Of course, we all like to think that we treat all crew members equal, but it could be that some crew members are always available more often than not, or maybe they have better skill sets. So in that case, you can actually just select first choice, send them an invite, or second choice, send them an invite. Makes things a little bit easier. You also, let me just bring this down a little bit. You also have the option here to use tags. Now, tags are extremely useful for crew. What tags allow you to do is actually tag a crew member based on their skill set. You can see here I've got a sound technician tag. Perfect, that's what I'm planning for. I can select my sound technician tag, and only the crew that can work as sound technicians will be shown. So not only can you tag them on their skill sets, but you can also tag them on maybe driver's license level. Maybe some crew can only drive certain vehicles. Whatever you can think of, you can tag them on. They're completely up to you. Those tags will all get added here in the crew members module. You can see them existing there. So you can select one or multiple crew members and tag them this way here. Okay, but in any case, we know Amy is a sound technician, so we're going to go ahead and plan Amy here. Now I am going to say, hey, Amy, I need you to work a little earlier. I also need you to stay a little bit later. I'm going to move it here, and then I'm going to move it, and then I'm going to move it there. Now, we don't send notifications to crew members when they're planned, because if so, Amy would have just received 5 notifications in the space of 5 seconds, and Amy could become quickly annoyed with me and probably not want to work for me that much. So that's why we don't send notifications. If you do need to notify your crew of changes made in the schedule here, you can click on the envelope at the top, select the project you would like to inform them of, and select the crew member here. And you can email this directly to Amy. Now, Amy will know some things have changed because it's all marked in red. Normally, it would be black text if it was just a first-time communication, but these changes were made, so it's in red text with an asterisk here, meaning there have been changes. Now, I can also right-click on Amy here, and I can go ahead and switch her visibility. What this means is that this would not be visible on Amy's schedule. You can also see here that this is turned orange, meaning it's not fully filled because you haven't informed the crew yet. So when you actually make that visible again, if I now were to go and actually check Amy's schedule here, I can go into the schedule, and let me just remove some things, and I can type Amy's name here. And we're in March, so that was for April. Aha, there we go. So now there's the sound technician role there for the house party that I just planned her on. So you can always also go and check your crew member schedules here just to make sure everything is being relayed properly. All right, what I can also do here is I can right click on Amy and I can edit Amy. Not actually edit Amy, but edit her planning. Here you can find the crew member rate that gets set. Now, I do want to take a moment here to discuss crew rates because I know this is quite a hot topic and we've gotten a lot of questions about this before. With your crew rates, what you're going to do is you're going to actually set those up per crew member. So I'm going to double click on Amy here, and in the rates tab here at the top, this is where you'll find all the rates that you set. Now, when you add a new rate, this is where you'll find an hourly rate and a daily rate. A daily rate will be set and will be charged up until the maximum amount of hours that you set. If you don't like daily rate, no problem. You can just apply an hourly rate and leave this at 0 so that the hourly rate will only be calculated. So this is also how you can set up an overtime. So for example, let's say that we charge $200 for the day up to 8 hours. That is what we pay the crew. But after 8 hours, maybe we will also give them, I don't know, 75 an hour. So after the 200 and 8 hours, 75 per hour will be calculated here. Now, I'm going to just add this as a webinar test rate so that you can see exactly how that gets selected. If I now go back here in the crew planner, I can right click on Amy again and click edit, and I can go ahead and choose that different rate here as well. So again, it's nice and easy to choose different rates. I didn't save my rate that I said before, but if you are adding more rates than what I've just shown you, a tip that we have is to also set up your functions here with different rates. So for example, maybe you have sound technician normal rate, and then directly after that, you might have sound technician double rate. It depends also, every country has different labor laws. I'm from the US, every state in the US has different labor laws. So it can be difficult to always have the right format in Rentman. We are trying to improve that. But for now, if you do need to charge more than 2 rates in one, you would set up 2 functions for those rates. Okay, So this brings me to the end of the crew planner. I'm going to take a small break here for some questions, and then we'll go through statistics and we'll wrap things up. So
Thanks for
panelists.
thanks.
Bogdan.
Yeah, thanks for that, Allison. We don't actually have any questions as of yet. I would recommend just waiting for a minute or so to see if any questions are coming in. And in the meantime, well, everybody who hasn't already, please wash your hands and we'll be ready for the next set of questions.
Sounds good.
And already here's a perfect one. So Menelaus is asking if we can just briefly go through the maintenance module and what it can do to your equipment. So what can we achieve with the maintenance module?
I would be more than happy to. Also, if there are any areas that you thought we missed today that you would have liked to see, please fill out our survey at the end so that I can improve this in the future. Of course, there's so much to go through with best practices that I want to make sure that we tailor this more in the future. So maintenance is a great suggestion. We'll take a moment here to go through that. Here in the maintenance module, you can manage all of your repairs, inspections, and lost equipment items. Most of the time, you're actually going to add these in the warehouse. So when items come back in the warehouse, you have the option to mark them as defective or lost. When you mark them as defective, a repair will get set up here in the maintenance module for you. Of course, for repairs, you can also set up task notes and files on the repair level. You can also create your repair slip here, and you can print this out to any of the guys that need to actually create the repair, add any remarks that you need to on this repair as well. And then on the lost equipment side, just in the warehouse module as well, that's when you're going to notice when things are coming back from an event and aren't there. So you'll mark them as lost in the warehouse module. You'll find all of your lost equipment here in this tab, and then you can mark them as found if they are found later on. Of course, you also have the option to create manual repairs. So you can do that here by searching for the equipment item. So we'll say maybe one of our customers decided to do a mic drop and they damaged our microphone. So we can search for that equipment item. We can choose the serial number if there is one. We can assign it to a crew member. We can also add it as an external repair, add some more information here. So not only can this be set up from the warehouse, but also manually here in the maintenance module. I hope that covers what you wanted to see. It's pretty self-explanatory here in the maintenance module. Of course, it's nice to have a little tour here, but you can manage most everything that you need to do.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for that, Allison. No, we are short on questions. The ones that remain are being typed out by our other panelists. So if you want, you can proceed, and we can come back to the later questions later on.
Sounds good. The last section that I will go through with you today is our statistics module. I want to give some examples of how some of these statistics can help you in your day-to-day business, and also just bring your attention to them if you haven't had a look before. So here at the top, this is where you'll find the ad. We have some example ones here from the trial account, but you can add a new one here at the top. This is where you'll find all the different areas that you can create statistics on. For example, maybe you want to see the projects that you're doing per client, or maybe even the projects per type. For example, maybe you are doing weddings and conferences and festivals. You could see what is your biggest moneymaker, which type of events should you put more effort into. On the equipment side, you can pull a statistic on your rental equipment. You can see insight into your usage percentage. So as I mentioned, when you're scanning and tracking your equipment, you can actually see how often that equipment has been used. And you can pull this and export it as an Excel file, and you can sort everything, do whatever you'd like to, also in Rentman. But maybe you want to see, okay, what is a list of items that I actually need to sell? So you can actually pull this data into other apps as well for further analysis. But the last statistic that I also want to show you here is the sub-rental statistic. Now, as I mentioned, your sub-rental costs are a really good part of Rentman. It helps you have that accurate view of your costings. You can also pull the sub-rental statistics, and you can see which equipment items are you sub-renting the most. Maybe you see that you have sub-rented one item a lot over the past year. So it could be in your best interest to buy that equipment item and add it to your own inventory instead of spending that extra money every time and sub-renting it. So again, if you haven't had a look at statistics, I definitely recommend it. This data can be really invaluable for your business decisions later on. Okay, so I think we are just a minute over, but of course we want to take some more questions if there are any. But I've come to the end of some of the best practices that I wanted to show you today. I hope you found them useful and learned something that you haven't seen before. Panelists, do we have any live questions that we should attend to?
Digging for those, Allison. I'll be with you in about 20 seconds.
Not a problem.
There is one coming in from Roberto, and he's wondering if there is a document template for sent material, which is in repairs. To rephrase that, actually, if we have an item in repair and we send it to somebody else to fix it for us, is there a document template that we can use in that case?
Yes. So what I would recommend is actually using the repair slip that we already have. It's called default, but you can find that here. I would just edit this to your needs. At the moment, it's very a generic one, but of course you can add your letterhead to this. You can add other information here as well, and you would customize this document in the configuration module. From here, you can now email this document. So you could go ahead and email it directly to your repair guys at the external company, and they can see what actually needs to be done. Or you can print this document and send it directly with the equipment item as well. So yeah, I would recommend this document. You can duplicate it, make it completely different than what it is, whatever you need.
Perfect answer. Thank you very much. Now, the next question comes in from Giorgio, and he's just wondering if you can just go through tasks a little bit and what can we do with tasks?
Of course, I'd be happy to. Okay, so here we have the tasks module. You can add tasks in this way and go ahead and give it a name and a deadline. So let's say we need to call Sarah from the event. Make it generic because we're not sure which event. We're also going to add a deadline here. So let's say that the deadline is tomorrow, and we'll say it's not for every crew member, but it is for specific crew members. So let's say that this is for myself and Brian. We can also leave some notes here. Maybe we want to leave notes on what we were going to call Sarah about. You can also tag these tasks so you can quickly see, okay, what are the tasks for sales? What are the tasks for the maintenance guys? What are the tasks for your warehouse personnel? So you can use tags there as well. And then you can go ahead and save this. Now I see my task there, and I can also manage my tasks with also files here in the task module. To mark it as complete, you can mark it here. You can also go ahead and finish this one and create a new one as well. Now, I would like to point out that these are generic tasks. They're not connected to anything specific. What you should also keep in mind is that you can add tasks on the project level, which would be connected to that project. And you can also add tasks on the equipment side, on the contact side. Maybe you want to add a tasks to a specific customer and check in with them. That way you can add tasks and connect it to something. So you have the tasks module, which can be some generic tasks, but then also you can connect them to those specific items. I also want to bring your attention here to the notifications as well. Again, when tasks are created, you can receive those notifications. So if a task is assigned to you, you can receive that notification. If it's a new public task for anyone, if a deadline has expired, or if a personal or public deadline has expired. So I would also recommend setting these up as well per crew member so that when these tasks are created, everybody's informed, everything gets taken care of in a timely manner.
Flawless as always, and looks like we're out of questions and out of times as well. So Allison, take it away.
Perfect. Well, everyone, I just want to thank you again for joining today. Like I said, we know times are not the best at the moment, but it's a really great opportunity to learn Rentman a little bit more, see if you've been doing things in the right way or if there's way to improve. This is our last webinar in the training series, and we hope to hold more of these in the future. Please feel free to reach out to us if you'd like to see when we'll hold these, if you'd like to give us more feedback. Again, there will be a survey directly after I close out this webinar, so please take the survey and you'll receive an email 24 hours after this webinar as well with some additional information, like how to sign out for how to see the recordings and sign the survey again. Thank you, Lauren, Bogdan, and Parker for supporting me today and all the amazing questions from you guys, and hopefully we'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye.